Welcome to the Week 9 LA City Section football video. Connor Morissette and Alex Gar. Alex, the CalPreps rankings, they went crazy this past week. I don't know if it was the wild weather or what, but the top 10 looks totally different than it did last week, and we've kept saying the playoff picture looks clear and clear. Now it's a little foggy.
A little bit, but to keep in mind, pretty much the top 8 is the same. So it's the same collection of teams. It's just the 1 through 8 that did jumble up a little bit. We saw Birmingham jump up to number 2, tied pretty closely there with San Fernando at 3, Carson dropping a little bit. Then, of course, Venice, that big loss to Palisades, they kind of sunk down a little bit. But it seems like that top 8, still the same collection of teams, just a little bit different order.
As I've started the show the past few weeks, and I will again, we have the same 8 as the CalPreps 8, but it's a little bit different. So let's run through the CalPreps 8. At 1, Narbonne, that stayed the same, but at 2, Birmingham, they jump over San Fernando, who's 3. That means Carson falls to 4. Garfield 5, Eagle Rock 6. Pali, after that win over Venice, is in at 7, and Venice falls to number 8. 9, 10, Westchester and Dorsey. Dorsey jumps ahead of Reseda. So we kind of see some teams moving, some shaking, but I agree with your first point that it looks like that 8 is going to stay the same. All that really matters is, in terms of a different team jumping in, if Westchester is able to beat Venice, but I think neither of us foresee that.
No, I think the top 8 is pretty much sealed. Like you mentioned, if Westchester beats Venice at the end of the year, then maybe they got a pretty good resume to jump into that open division. But I think for now, this top 8 is a lock to make the open. Palisades, we talked a lot about them kind of creeping in. Seems like they've finally made that case. They made the statement. I think they're in as a lock in that open division. Question now is, who gets that number 1 seed in Division 1? I think that's going to be the big storyline rest of the season.
Yeah, if the season ended right now, it would be Westchester, but Dorsey is in the mix with that. If they win out, beat Crenshaw in a couple weeks, that'll be huge. Reseda has a chance, but it looks like the statistics are kind of against them because of the weak league they play in. A few thoughts I just have on these seedings. So Birmingham's strength of schedule are why they've jumped ahead of San Fernando. The two teams right now are tied in the statistical formula. It's some crazy number and then a decimal, and they're tied completely. But the fact that Birmingham's strength of schedule is a little tougher than San Fernando is why they're at number 2. So we're seeing the Valley Mission League just being so bad.
Yeah, that hurts.
It's hurting Reseda and it's hurting San Fernando a bit, which, you know, you hate to see that be a reason why they're penalized. There's really nothing they can do.
Yeah, San Fernando went out and scheduled some tough non-conference opponents. They went out, tried to build up that strength of schedule because they know at the end of the day, Valley Mission League is just not going to give them the test. The West Valley League is certainly down this year as well, with Taft yet to scratch the win column, and then El Camino Real, just not quite the same ball club that we've seen. So Birmingham, they get the advantage of playing in a slightly tougher league in West Valley. Valley Mission, man, there's just nothing they can do. Maybe some, reseeding, some movement of some leagues might come down the pike in a couple of years, but for now, you just do what you can. You schedule the tough teams. You're playing the best you can.
Carson had been a top 3 team for every week until this week, and I think we both agree that it makes sense to move them out of that top 3. The eye test favors Narbonne, obviously, and then San Fernando and Birmingham. Just Carson, it hasn't been at that level so far.
Not quite. I mean, the sophomore quarterback, Yui Ale, has played very phenomenally so far. Just that young kid, just a sophomore, we were talking about him pretty much all season long. But for Carson, it seems like they don't have that statement win. They've been in some ball games, but they haven't really kind of cracked that column and made that big statement. We keep saying flip-flop Venice and Carson. Well, Venice kind of burned us a little bit. They dropped the game to Pali and kind of fall all the way down there. But Carson, it seems like they're sliding back down towards where they belong. They're going to get that 4-5 matchup. They're going to play Garfield. Maybe if it were to hold today, they'd play Garfield. So that would be a huge movement to kind of see which team is really healthier at that point. I think Carson at 4, that seems right.
2 other points with the CalPreps rankings. So by beating Venice, Palisades avoids Narbonne, which is huge in the first round. And I say for now, on the sheet here, but I think they're going to be locked into that 7, and if anything, they'll move up. And I don't think they'll move up as far as 4 or 5, which means they'll avoid Narbonne again. If it's 6 or 7, that's where you want to be. So Palisades, that win over Venice, huge for winning the Western League, huge for playoff implications in general. But the fact is, it's big because they don't have to play Narbonne, it looks like. So that is really, really important. You want to avoid Narbonne at all costs.
Yeah, we were joking a little bit. Maybe Venice sandbags, loses that game to Westchester, so they drop down to Division 1. Because for all intents and purposes, getting that 8 seed in Division 1, in open division,
it's a death sentence.
It's kind of, it's a death knell. You're not going to do a whole lot against Narbonne. So if you kind of creep up into 7 or maybe that 6-5 spot, you get to play that first round matchup and avoid the big, bad, ugly Narbonne. As you mentioned, the second round, if you're the 4 or 5, you're going to get them. There's not a whole lot you can do. But if you get into that 6 spot, 6-7, that's that sweet spot. Yep. You're going to avoid them as you head in towards the later rounds of the open division playoffs. But then you're going to have to deal with a San Fernando, maybe a Birmingham, a team that's probably going to be pretty darn tough to beat. So Pali, they're sitting pretty right now. Hopefully it stands there.
Lastly, Alex, so Venice still has to play Westchester, like you said, and Fairfax. Fairfax, of course, beat Palisades. Eagle Rock plays Franklin this week. Carson has Banning. these rankings can change. That's kind of
Sure
the
they can.
underlying point. We see 6, 7, 8 really tight, 2, 3 really tight. It's not the end of the year right now. We still have a lot to figure out.
Yeah, I think Eagle Rock right now is the one team you got to worry about, because if they lose to Franklin, that's going to plummet them all the way out. If Carson loses to Narbonne at the end of the year, they're not going to move a whole lot. We all know about Narbonne. If they lose to Banning, that might kind of switch them up a little bit, but it seems like Eagle Rock right now has the most to lose. They lose to Franklin, they might drop out of that open division. The rest of them, they're playing some pretty beatable league opponents, but for Eagle Rock, that's going to be the tough one.
I agree with you. Let's get into our top 10 now. We have Westchester at 10. Remember, CalPreps has them at 9, but we have them at 10. They're 7-1. They won in a rescheduled game because of the rain, 20-14 on the road against Fairfax. Huge game for them. Jillian Carter was the difference. He had a 1-yard touchdown run that separated them over Fairfax in that game. And that's a big win for the Western League because now we have a 4-way tie.
Yeah, right. I mean, it looks like Palisades and Venice are going to kind of have that edge because Pali looks like they have a lot of tiebreakers. Fairfax, I think they're just going to have a tougher road out. Pali plays a couple of lower teams in that Western League. But Jillian Carter, he threw 2 picks through the air, but then rushed for a couple of touchdowns, had 72 yards on the ground. Then Nathaniel Adams, we talked about him all year, 23 carries, 141 yards, and a touchdown. So a good thing for him. These guys just kind of putting it together. That was a huge statement win there to beat that Fairfax team, because we were talking about Westchester, picked them against Pali, kind of burned us a little bit, made us look stupid, but you know what? They bounced right back, and this is a huge win because they stay in the conversation. If anything changes, they're going to be one of those first teams into open division, and if they're not, they're going to be a high seed in Division 1. So that's a big win for Westchester.
As I said earlier, if the season ended today, Westchester would be the #1 seed in Division 1. At 9, we have Reseda, and that's because of the CalPreps ranking. So if we were running it, Reseda would be #1, but remember, we have our top 10, CalPreps has their top 10, and that's the 10 you go by. So 9 Reseda, they're 8-1. They beat Panorama 35-12. Rain played a bit of a mark in that one as well. No stats on Max Preps, but again, I'm sure the usual suspects balled out.
Yeah, 35-12 over Panorama. They get Van Nuys next. Like we were talking about, the Valley Mission League just not quite being that tough competition for a lot of these teams. I think Reseda, we've seen them all season long just beat up on a lot of teams. They had the one shot against San Fernando, stubbed their toe, didn't play the way they wanted to, but they're going to be the odds-on favorite in Division 1. They're going to have Dorsey, maybe it's going to be Westchester, but I really like Reseda. I like the way they're playing. As skill positions go, as some of the best talent in the city section is kind of concentrated in a couple of players, Reseda's towards the top of that list. They got some really good guys.
So at 8, we do have Venice, 5-3. They lost to Palisades, 24-17. They were up 10-0 Friday night.
Yes,
Game
they
gets
were.
rescheduled. Alex, you were there. They go Saturday, and we talked about it yesterday. It looked like Palisades, they were kind of more together during that stretch, the Friday night to the Saturday morning. Venice, they kind of all strolled in a little leisurely. Pali arrived as a team. They looked ready to play. Venice didn't. And what ended up happening was that Palisades got the victory in that one, and you were there. Kind of take me through how that happened.
Yeah, so I gave you the analogy yesterday. Venice went out after Friday night. They hit the clubs. They had a good time, went out to dinner. Palisades, they went back to the hotel. They ate as a team. They watched some film. Of course, that didn't really happen. These are high school kids. But these kids, it seems like Palisades, they came back ready to play. The fans were there. The kids were into it. It was a totally different tone come Saturday afternoon. I'll be honest, Friday night, if that game kept playing, I think Venice could have put up 30 and kind of ran out the door with this victory well in hand. But it seemed like once things got to the Saturday slate, Palisades was a completely different team. They were ready to play. I don't know what was going on with Venice. Maybe they weren't. Maybe they thought they could just kind of keep it rolling, do the same things they were doing, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But, man, Pali really punched them in the mouth, and credit to them. They came up with a huge win.
Eagle Rock, Pali, and Venice are all really close in CalPreps, so we'll see how that kind of shakes out towards the end of the season. They're all within statistical little decimal points away from each other. So when you choose this formula to decide the playoffs, that's really going to be important. Pali has the easiest schedule down the stretch. Venice still has to play Westchester and Fairfax, and of course Eagle Rock plays Franklin, so should favor Pali, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think so. I just want to shout out a couple of guys that had huge impacts in that Venice game. Max Police, 24 carries.
Yeah, he was huge.
And the thing was, towards the end of that Saturday game, they just kept running the football, and they pretty much ran it down Venice's throats. They didn't stop a whole lot on third down. They seemed to be really effective. Time of possession really favored the Dolphins. Kind of dominated Saturday. Doesn't matter. Look at any way you want to look at it. Pali really dominated on Saturday. Police, 24 carries, 121 yards, and a touchdown. Noah Gadushim had a game-sealing touchdown catch. 4 catches for 75 yards. As I mentioned, Will Janae also caught a touchdown. And Forrest Brock really kind of coming into his own as that sophomore starter. 12 of 22, 156 yards, couple of touchdowns, didn't make any mistakes. Kid looks really sharp, and Pali, they're kind of tuning up here towards the end of that Open Division playoffs.
So yeah, Alex, you mentioned it. Those were the difference makers for Palisades, and where are they in our top 10? They're one above Venice at number 7. We mentioned it earlier, just how they showed up. They were ready to play on Saturday. You highlighted all the difference makers. We'll see if they can get that number 6 spot, because say Eagle Rock does slip up against Franklin, they'll have a chance to do that, and they have a very easy schedule, as we keep saying. Uni and then Hamilton, the 2 worst teams in the Western League. Great year for Palisades. They've overachieved a little bit, dare I say.
No, I think they kind of have, and they could be even more overachieving. They could finish the season 10-0 if they had beaten Brentwood like it looked like they would. If they had held it together against Fairfax and hadn't given up a couple of those turnovers, they would be an undefeated team. But, you know, things happen. Kind of doesn't always go the way you want. Palisades, as you mentioned, they finished the season with Uni and Hamilton. We were talking about Venice dropping all the way down. That was kind of tough, but there's no way that we could sit there and rank Venice ahead of Palisades. And Palisades kind of came out, punched them in the mouth, and did what they had to do to beat them. So Pali's sitting at 7. If you mentioned Eagle Rock, if they slip up against Franklin, Pali's going to move up into that spot because I don't see them losing, and it'll be really interesting.
And last week we picked, of course, Venice, both of us, to beat Palisades.
Stupid.
Pali won, and we paid for it a little bit.
I think my shirt's still wet.
Yeah, so check out that video of us getting water ballooned. I believe it was Alex, I know, who said, if Pali wins, throw water balloons at us. Don't fill it full.
I'll never do that again.
And they didn't. Filled it with water, but yeah, we got water ballooned, and I ate one in the neck from Daniel Hayes, the quarterback.
Kid's got a good arm.
Yeah, he's got
a well to prove it.
Yep. All right, so in CalPreps, Carson's 4. We have them at 6. They're 4-4. They beat Gardena 52-7, a game that was rescheduled for Monday. Huge game in the Marine League this week. They play at a neutral site against Banning. Ooh, that game has a lot on the line in terms of seeding, because I think if Banning beats Carson, I don't want to say Carson will fall out of the Open Division, but
I think they will.
Yeah, they might.
Yeah, and Banning's hot. They just had a big win over San Pedro, so if Carson loses this game, I do think they drop out. Banning can kind of play spoiler. Looks like Banning's going to be out of Open Division. There's really no way they can jump in, but they certainly could make some noise in Division 1 if they continue to kind of rally here, get some momentum going, and they could kind of push Carson out of that Open Division. As you mentioned, they beat Gardena 52-7. Devontae Lee had 15 catches and 15 rushes, 105 yards, and a touchdown. Uiale was 9 of 10, had 98 yards and a touchdown.
Efficient, yeah, he was great.
Very efficient. And Cross Filetoy, good to see him back on the field. He had 3 rushes for 44 yards and a touchdown. So really, I mean, Gardena wasn't too much of a test. Carson just kind of went out, ran their offense, held them to only 7 points. And Banning, it's going to be a big one.
A few other guys, I should say, I want to shout out for Carson. I hope I'm getting this name right, but Virex Apui, he had 2 rushing touchdowns, short yardage guy. It looked like kind of taking over for Ja'Cory Moe. He also had 11 tackles on defense. And then 2 guys who had picks in the game, Orlando Ford and Davion McClinton. So that defense for Carson, that's
always been good.
What's getting them here, and that's their MO. They showed up again. At 5, Eagle Rock, 8-0. They beat Lincoln 28-6, a game that was affected by the rain again. I wouldn't read too much into that scoreline. I think with no rain,
doesn't matter.
That was the Friday night game. It would have been a way more lopsided score. Huge game for them now. On the road against Franklin. Yes, it's a Division II team, but Franklin's undefeated. They've really killed everyone. Is Eagle Rock legitimate? If they are, they go out and they win this game handily.
Yeah, I think this is a litmus test for both teams. Is Franklin legit? I think they're sitting at 14 in CalPreps. They were kind of milling around the high 20s for a while. Now they've kind of bumped up to 14. If you want to show that you're really one of the best teams in that area, here's a prime opportunity. And for Eagle Rock, you got to defend the turf, man. This is going to be a huge, huge game. I think our buddy Keith DeMolder is going to be over there. Going to be a fantastic, fantastic game, wire to wire. I'm really curious to see how Alfred Bobadilla plays against a pretty darn good defense over there for Eagle Rock. Can he move the football? Is that aerial attack really as strong as we think it is? As we've seen some of these other opponents, Eagle Rock's going to easily be one of the toughest teams they've faced all season. I can't wait for this one.
We'll pick that game in a little bit. At 4, Garfield, 8-0, just like Eagle Rock. They beat Southgate 35-7, another game that was rescheduled. They play Huntington Park next, should be an easy win. So PJ Garcia in this game wasn't his usual dominant self, but who picked up the slack? None other than Angel Hidalgo, who's had a great year. 7 catches for him, 114 yards, touchdown, also 10 tackles on defense. He is week in and week out showing us why he will probably be on our all-city team as a wide receiver. And hey, if he doesn't make it for that, he'll certainly make it on defense. The kid is a stud, just like we talk about PJ Garcia doing so well every week. You know, he has an off game. Hidalgo picks up the slack. Really impressed with him.
Yeah, Hidalgo's going to get a long look for that all-city receiver. And how about how nice it must be for John Batista, a sophomore quarterback, to have a dependable target like that. Batista was 8 of 17 for 127 yards and a touchdown. As you talked about, Hidalgo had 7 catches for 114 yards. So he's the target. When you're in trouble, that's who you go to. If you're falling back, you're getting rushed a little bit, if he's out in the flat or if he's down the field, you're going to huck it up and have him make a play because the kid's just been fantastic. As you're talking about, they're 8-0. They get Huntington Park. I think I said it last week, take it to the bank, man. Garfield's going undefeated. This one's pretty easy, and unfortunately, it's just not going to affect their seeding a whole lot. I think at 4 or 5, depending on what some of these other teams do, Garfield's going to sit right there at 4 or 5. Not a whole lot they can do at this point. But to their part, I think they're going to go 10-0. We talked about them beating Southgate. They get Huntington Park. Then the battle for East LA against Roosevelt. It's going to be a really, really good Bulldog team in the playoffs.
I agree with you. One other guy I want to shout out, Nicholas Delgadillo, 2 rushing touchdowns and 11 tackles.
Kid's a beast, man. Huge.
At 3, we have Birmingham. Remember, CalPreps has them at 2. We have them at 3. They beat up on Cleveland 40-8 on the road at Chatsworth next. Kind of like Garfield, they're going to win the league, they're going to win the rest of their games, and go into the Open Division playoffs on a high.
Yeah, on the road. I mean, they played Cleveland at Cleveland, where Birmingham's been playing a lot of their home games. So kind of a funny road home game for them. But Jason Artiga, really
great game again.
Really nice game for him. 16-24, 188 yards and 3 touchdowns. Abdul Adu had 6 catches, 171 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns.
And we don't touch on him too often, so
not
great
really
game from him.
Yeah, good for the Patriots. I mean, they have a lot of guys. We talked about DJ Banks and Mason White a lot, but some of the other guys are really chipping in. Janina Lianco and Herring had rushing touchdowns, so these guys are really just continuing to put up points, as you mentioned, beating Cleveland 40-8. They get Chatsworth and Taft. I mean, it's just, it'll be fine. I mean, they'll win these games, but you're just going to kind of stay healthy. I don't think Banks will play. They might get some other guys working in a quarterback and then just kind of work towards the Open Division playoffs. I'm curious to see who they draw. If they're 2 right now, and let's say they draw Palisades.
That'd be a great game.
That'd be a really, really fun game because both of these teams are going to be playing kind of lower league teams and kind of tuning things up. They're not going to lose. Hopefully they don't get hurt. It's going to be really fun. Both those teams will be really hot. I would look forward to that one the most.
Yeah, as you said, still no DJ Banks for Birmingham. He was the premier running back, or at least one of them in the city section before the year started. Got off to a great start and then got hurt. So we'll keep monitoring him. Hopefully he's back by the playoffs because he'll really help. I know Mason White does well, and they have some other running backs who are really good, but DJ Banks is kind of an irreplaceable guy come playoff time, so hopefully he can figure it out. At 2, we have San Fernando, 6-2. They beat Van Nuys 52-0, or Van Nuys, I should say, 52-0. Against Silmar Friday, rivalry game, you'll be there.
Yes, sir.
I sound like a broken record. They'll win the rest of their games, and they'll go into the Open Division on a high.
Yeah, a lot of these leagues are just, it's pretty much one team. Maybe if you got a good league, you got 2 teams, but it seems like this season there's just 2 teams per league, maybe only 1. I think Valley Mission, San Fernando, as you mentioned, Silmar, that is a huge, huge rivalry game. There's some animosity between those 2 schools. They're pretty close to each other. A lot of kids grow up on that boulevard, just very close to the same school. That's going to be a ton of fun. It's their homecoming game. I think it's a blackout. Their slogan is Survive the Night. I don't know what the hell that means, but I can't wait to be there. It's going to be very, very exciting. In that 52-0 win over Van Nuys, they just put up 52 points in the first half. Van Nuys said, you know what, we're just getting on the bus. Don't worry about it. We're not coming out for the second half. Nehemiah Thompson on 3 carries, had 105 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. Also returned a fumble for a touchdown. Kyle Bryant on 5 carries, had 120 yards and a touchdown. Andrew Hernandez also had a rushing touchdown. How about Darian Allen? San Fernando never throws the ball. Darian Allen had a 20-yard touchdown
threw it once,
reception.
correct?
They finally threw it once, and it was a touchdown pass to Darian Allen. So hats off to you, Darian. And then Felix Rodriguez had a punt return touchdown. So yeah, just blowing the doors off these teams. They're going to continue to win the rest of their games. They're going to be 2nd or 3rd in that Open Division, and then have a really tough first-round matchup. Same story.
Yeah, Narbonne's number 1. They were off last week, so nothing to say about them. Play Gardena this week. They'll win the rest of their games and be number 1 in the Open Division. So there's our top 10. A lot of moving and shaking. We'll see what happens come playoff time because there's still a lot to be worked out. All right, Alex, we spend a lot of time on this show talking about the best of the best teams in the LA City section. There are still some teams who are winless, and we do this from time to time. Which team's going to get off the schneid? Give us kind of a rundown.
Off the schneid, yeah. Last week we had 5 teams that were winless. We talked about Maywood being one of the teams that had a good shot. They played Roy Ball. They got a forfeit win.
Take it how you can get it, yeah.
That's in the column. They're now 1-7, but some other teams are 0-8. Southeast, they're at home against Bell. They're 0-8.
I don't think that's going to be the one.
I don't see Southeast beating Bell. West Adams gets to travel to Jefferson. West Adams being 0-8.
Jefferson's a good team.
I think Democrats probably win that one. Sotomayor, they're 0-8, traveling to Maywood, who just got off the schneid last week.
That's the one right there.
I think that might be the one.
Sotomayor.
Maywood 1-7, Sotomayor 0-8, Battle of the Titans. And then El Camino Real goes to Taft, who's 0-8. They haven't scored a lot of points. I don't think that's going to be a win. So, looks like Maywood, they might, well, they got off the schneid last week. They may help another team. Just a nice community game.
Yeah.
It might help Sotomayor get off the schneid himself.
We could kind of flip that on its head and say Maywood wins, then that's their first on the field win. So then we could talk about that next week. So yeah, that'll be the game for for the people out there who are looking to see a really feel-good story, maybe check out that game.
Jake Otto, the junior from Banning quarterback, had a fantastic game in a 27-7 win over San Pedro. He was 11 of 15, had 180 yards passing and a touchdown. Also had 15 carries, 156 yards on the ground, and a touchdown. So the kid ran all over San Pedro. This was a game, I think, when we picked it last week, we were looking at it, we thought probably San Pedro beats Banning. Banning's just kind of down a little bit. Jake Otto really took that to heart, went out, stomped all over him. So huge, huge game for Jake. You get my game ball.
Yeah, he's been great. And Banning, hey, say they go knock out Carson, almost as if they've turned their season around. They got off to a really poor start. They can beat Carson. That will get a lot of people's attention, and in the D1 playoffs, they will be a force to be reckoned with for sure. I have Cameron Senegal from Monroe, had a huge night in a 40-6 win over Pauley. We see some ridiculous rushing statistics, and here's another one. 32 carries for 276 yards, nearly 10 yards a carry, and 2 touchdowns in the game. So the city section loves to run the ball. We've seen it with Joseph Todd, seen it at Roosevelt, Arleta, Senegal at Monroe is just another name on that list, and he's having a great year, so I wanted to shout him out. Was he on our rushing leaders list?
Yes, he was. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these teams, as you mentioned, the quarterback on those teams has a very simple job. Just yeah, so Cameron Senegal, James Ochoa, a lot of guys on some of these other teams we don't talk about a lot. Senegal's really been running all over teams. He's over the 1,000-yard mark, so huge, huge game for him. Nice game ball for you.
Yep, he's been great. Let's pick some games. Game of the week is Eagle Rock at Franklin. Is Eagle Rock for real? Do they win this game?
Yes, give me the Eagles. I said last week, take it to the bank. They're going undefeated. The odds might not be too great for this one against Franklin. If you're looking for an underdog, that's going to be the one you want to take. Franklin's a great team with Alfred Bobadilla there at quarterback, but I think Eagle Rock is the toughest team Franklin has played. This is going to be a really, really tough test. Eagle Rock's going to be motivated. They know their season. Open division hopes are going to be on the line. I'm taking the Eagles.
Yeah, they win this game. They're into the open division. That should be motivation enough. I have Eagle Rock as well. Carson, Banning from El Camino College.
Ooh, big one. Banning had a huge win. I was talking about Jake Otto helping propel the Pilots 27-7 over San Pedro, but I think this feel-good story might come to an end here against Carson. I like the defense. I think Carson, that tune-up against Gardena just allowed them to kind of breathe easy. They're going to go into Banning. It's going to be a motivated team. Pilots are playing well right now, but I like Carson in this one.
I do too. That defense needs to make a statement, and I think they will. Otto won your game ball. Carson needs to make sure that he doesn't win the game ball next week.
Absolutely.
And we'll see. We talk a lot about that defense. I think they show up in this game, and they get the win over Banning. Might be close because we saw that San Pedro game was really close, and it took an injured quarterback for San Pedro, Bernal, to come out, and that really helped Carson's fortunes. So I wouldn't be surprised if this game was close, but Carson knows how to win Marine League games that aren't against Narbonne. I think they win this game. Fairfax at Venice.
I like Venice in this one, even though Fairfax is kind of hot. They've won a couple of games. They lost to Westchester last week. I don't really know why they lost to Westchester. I thought that would be a nice propelling game, get them into the rest of this Western League slate. I think Venice bounces right back. I think this game is going to get ugly in a hurry. Venice is angry. They're motivated. They want to stay in that open division playoffs. I got Venice by a couple scores.
Yeah, Venice is PO'd, so I'm taking them too. You're right. They are angry. And
very.
They're going to take it out on Fairfax. Any other games on your list?
So a couple games I just wanted to shout out, some smaller games. We've got Verdugo Hills at Pauley. You and I watched them play in baseball last year. That was a ton of fun.
It's a big rivalry.
Big rivalry. I just don't think the Pauley Parrots, when it comes to football, are quite the same team, so I got the Dons of Verdugo.
Yep, me too. They just lost to Arleta, so that kind of PO'd factor, I think that's going to play a part as well. Close game to Arleta. Pauley's just not in that same ballpark. Verdugo Hills will win that game.
So speaking of Arleta, Marshall against Taurus. Taurus who had a tough time against Arleta last week. Marshall's just kind of continuing to lose some big games. I've got Taurus in this one, couple scores. I think they're going to run all over Marshall.
Yeah, every time I've tried to make a case for Marshall, it's gone the other way, so I agree. I'll take Torres as well.
In the final game, we've got Locke at Crenshaw. We saw Locke kind of struggle against Dorsey last week. Dorsey beat him, I think, 50-7. We picked Dorsey in that game. I think the Cougars continue their winning ways. I think they beat up on Locke. Locke's a good program in that lower division. They're continuing to kind of build it up. Their soccer team is fantastic, so it's clear that they've got some athletes. But I think when it comes to football, I think the Cougars will win.
We're not playing soccer, Alex. We're playing football, so I have Crenshaw. I think we didn't disagree on a single one, which might be good because sometimes when we stray off the beaten path, someone looks really stupid. And when we both do, it's funny.
Both get pie in the face.
Yeah, and we get water balloons. So that's not going to happen this week. Hey, we'll see. I feel really good in all these picks. The past couple weeks I've been the fun guy doing the different teams. That ends this week. That ends in week 9. It's time to buckle up.
Straight-laced Connor.
Yeah, and get ready for the playoffs. So that's the week 9 show. Who knows what's going to happen in that open division? I certainly don't. We'll see you next time. He's Alex Carr. I'm Connor Morissette.